Captain Elias stirred from unconsciousness, his head pounding with the remnants of whatever collision had brought him to this strange place. His eyes slowly adjusted to the dim lighting of the room, the air cool and sterile around him. He blinked, trying to focus, but it took a few moments before his mind caught up with his surroundings. He wasn't on his ship. He wasn't even in space anymore. His body ached from a dozen different injuries, and the sharp scent of antiseptic filled his nose. As he tried to sit up, a wave of dizziness overcame him, and he groaned, letting his head fall back against the soft surface beneath him. "Don't try to move," a calm voice said from beside him. Elias turned his head, eyes locking onto a figure standing next to his bed. The sight took him by surprise. It was an alien, a humanoid creature with smooth silver-blue skin and striking features. Her eyes, a soft shade of violet, met his gaze with an almost serene intensity. She was dressed in a simple, form-fitting uniform that looked both practical and elegant. She stood with a quiet grace, her posture perfect, as if every movement had been carefully measured. "Who?" Elias started, his voice hoarse, but the words barely escaped his throat. The alien's lips parted slightly as if she was about to respond, but then she took a step closer, observing him carefully. She gently placed her hand on his shoulder, helping him lie back down. Elias couldn't help but notice how soft her touch was, despite the undeniable strength in her hands. "You're safe," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "We found you after the accident. You've been unconscious for several hours." Elias tried to speak again, but his throat felt dry. The alien nurse seemed to understand and offered him a glass of water. He gratefully accepted, lifting it to his lips with a shaky hand. As he drank, he studied her features. There was something about her that fascinated him. Her face was both alien and strangely familiar, her features sharp, yet perfectly symmetrical. Her eyes were full of curiosity, intelligence, and something else he couldn't quite place. He couldn't tell if it was wonder or worry, but it made him feel both vulnerable and strangely at ease. "Thank you," he said, his voice still raspy. She nodded, stepping back and giving him space. Her movements were fluid and purposeful. She reached down and grabbed a small medical device from the table beside his bed, and Elias watched her work with quiet precision. She made a few adjustments to the machine, and it emitted a soft hum. The device hovered over him for a moment before she moved it away. "You've sustained several injuries," she said, glancing at the readings on the machine. "But they are not life-threatening. You will recover in a few days." "Where am I?" Elias asked, his voice gaining strength. The alien nurse looked up at him, her violet eyes studying him carefully. She seemed to hesitate before answering, as if weighing the words carefully. "You are aboard the Verkalian ship Illumina," she said. "We are on a medical mission in deep space." "Verkalian?" Elias repeated, the name foreign and unfamiliar. "I've never heard of your species." The nurse's eyes softened slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "We are a peaceful race, focused on exploration and healing. We found your ship drifting in the debris field. Your vessel was severely damaged. You were the only survivor." Elias felt a chill run through him at the mention of his ship's destruction. He'd had no idea what had happened to the others. His thoughts flickered to his crew, his friends. But the pain in his body kept him from focusing too much on their fate. He couldn't think about it now. The nurse continued her work, applying salve to his injuries and adjusting the strange device to monitor his vitals. Elias watched her as she worked, still in awe of her presence. There was something mesmerizing about her. The way she moved, the softness of her voice. It felt almost comforting. And yet it was obvious she was nothing like any human he had ever met. Despite his confusion, Elias couldn't help but find himself drawn to her. It wasn't just her appearance, though her beauty was undeniable. It was the way she carried herself, the quiet strength in her movements. He had spent years in space, surrounded by people, yet never had he encountered anyone like her. It was as if the universe had just unfolded a new chapter in his life, one that was far more alien than he could have ever imagined. As she finished treating him, she set the medical device back on the table and turned toward the door. Elias opened his mouth to ask more questions, but before he could say anything, he blurted out, almost without thinking, "You're so beautiful." The words left his lips before he could even stop them, and the moment they did, he realized how inappropriate they sounded. His face flushed with embarrassment. He hadn't meant to say it out loud. He hadn't even considered the possibility that it might offend her. The nurse froze in place, her eyes widening ever so slightly. For a moment she seemed completely still, her body rigid as though the air had thickened between them. She slowly turned back to face him, her expression unreadable. Elias shifted uncomfortably on the bed, desperately wishing he could take back what he had just said. I'm sorry," Elias stammered, his cheeks burning. "I didn't mean—" The nurse blinked and looked away briefly, then slowly lowered her gaze to the ground. She seemed to collect herself before speaking, her voice quieter than before. "That is unusual," she said softly. Elias opened his mouth to apologize again, but the nurse held up her hand, stopping him. "No need to apologize," she said. "I am simply not used to such words. To us, compliments are significant. They are not spoken lightly." Elias blinked, confusion creeping into his mind. "Significant?" She nodded, her eyes shifting back to him. In our culture, when one is complimented so directly, it can mean more than just a simple comment on physical appearance. It can signify admiration, respect, and even intentions beyond mere words. Elias's confusion deepened, and he felt his stomach twist in discomfort. He hadn't meant anything beyond an innocent compliment, but it seemed like his words had somehow crossed a cultural boundary he didn't understand. "I'm sorry if I offended you," he said, his voice softer now. "I didn't know. I just thought you were, well, you're remarkable." She stood still for a moment, as though pondering his words. Then, finally, she nodded, though her expression remained unreadable. "I appreciate the sentiment," she said, "but please understand, such words are not often spoken. They hold weight in ways that you may not yet understand." The nurse's gaze softened just a little as she turned back toward the door. She paused, glancing over her shoulder before leaving the room. "I will return shortly. Rest now, Captain Elias. Your recovery is important." And with that, she was gone, leaving Elias to reflect on the awkward encounter. He lay back against the bed, still feeling the warmth of her presence, and wondered what exactly had just happened. He had no idea how to navigate this strange new world, or how his words might have changed everything. Captain Elias sat in the medical room, his mind swirling with thoughts of what had just happened. The words that had escaped his mouth earlier, a compliment about Lyra's beauty, had felt like a harmless statement at the time, but now, in the silence of the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had crossed some invisible line. Lyra had been so calm, so collected, but he could tell something had shifted after he spoke. He had tried to apologize, but it had felt like nothing could undo the awkwardness that hung in the air between them. Her reaction, quiet and careful, suggested that his words had meant more than he had ever realized. Elias leaned back on the bed, rubbing his hand over his face. His body still ached from the injuries he had sustained in the crash, but the discomfort in his chest felt more profound. It wasn't just physical pain that he was dealing with anymore. It was the uncertainty of what had happened between him and Lyra. She was different now, and he didn't know how to fix it. As he stared up at the ceiling, he wondered if this was just another complication in his already complicated life. After all, he was stranded in deep space aboard a foreign ship, surrounded by a species he barely understood. There were far more important things to focus on, like survival, but somehow Lyra's presence lingered in his mind. It was hard to focus on anything else when her image kept flashing through his thoughts. After a while, the door to the room slid open again, and Lyra entered. She was carrying a small medical kit, her movements as graceful and purposeful as before. But this time, there was something different in the way she moved. There was a distance in her eyes, a coolness that hadn't been there before. Elias noticed it immediately, and the guilt he had been trying to suppress resurfaced. Lyra set the kit down on the table beside his bed and began to prepare a new set of medical instruments. She was quiet, focused, as if the awkwardness of their last exchange hadn't affected her at all. But Elias could tell it had. She was acting differently now, more reserved. He cleared his throat, unsure of how to start the conversation.
I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable earlier, he said, his voice hesitant.
I said the first thing that came to mind. I didn't think it would cause any trouble. Lyra paused, but didn't turn to face him. She continued working with the instruments, as if his words hadn't fully registered. You are not accustomed to our ways, she said quietly. Her voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of something that Elias couldn't quite place. No, I guess not, Elias replied. I mean, I don't even know how I ended up here. I'm still trying to figure out where I am and what's going on. It's all a bit overwhelming, you know? Lyra finally looked at him, her violet eyes locking with his. I understand, she said softly. This is a strange place, and I know it must be difficult for you. But words have power among my people. Compliments are not just about appearance. They are about respect, admiration, and intent. Elias felt a pang of embarrassment. He had no idea that a simple compliment could carry so much weight. He had only wanted to express what he felt in the moment, but now it seemed like he had made a mistake he didn't know how to undo. He wasn't even sure if he wanted to undo it. He didn't want to offend Lyra, but he also didn't want to pretend that he hadn't meant what he said. I didn't mean to make it complicated, Elias muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. I guess I didn't think about how it might be perceived. Where I come from, a compliment like that is just, well, a compliment. It doesn't mean anything more than that. Lyra's gaze softened, and for the first time since the awkward moment earlier, she seemed to relax slightly. She placed the medical tools down and walked over to the bed, her presence once again calm and steady. There is no harm done, she said, but it is important that you understand. In my culture, when one gives a compliment, it is often taken as a sign of affection or interest. And if that is not the intention, it can cause confusion. Elias nodded slowly, trying to understand the nuances of what she was saying. He had never considered how different cultures and species might interpret words and gestures. He had always thought that compliments were universal, something that everyone could understand in the same way. But here, everything seemed different. The weight of his words hung in the air like an unspoken agreement, and now he had to learn how to navigate this alien world, both physically and socially. I understand now, Elias said, his voice sincere. I didn't mean to make things difficult, and I won't do it again. Lyra gave a small nod, her expression neutral but not unkind. It is not about avoiding the truth. It is about understanding the depth of words and the responsibility that comes with them. Elias thought about that for a moment. He had always spoken without thinking much about how his words might affect others, but here, in this strange new world, it seemed like every word had a ripple effect. It was a lesson he would have to learn if he wanted to survive in this alien environment. I'll try to be more careful, Elias said, but I still don't really understand. What I said wasn't bad, was it? Lyra paused before answering, as if carefully considering his question. No, she said after a moment. Your words were not bad. They were just unexpected. But we are learning, Captain Elias. We are learning to communicate, to understand each other. Elias felt a sense of relief wash over him, but it was fleeting. He still had so many questions about Lyra, about the Verkalians, and about what would happen to him now that he was stuck on their ship. Would they keep him here forever? Were they planning to help him get back to Earth, or was he simply a prisoner in a strange galaxy? Before he could ask any of those questions, Lyra stood up, smoothing out her uniform. She seemed more composed now, less distant than before. "I will return in a few hours to check on your progress," she said. "In the meantime, rest. Your body needs time to heal." Elias nodded, watching as she gathered her things and left the room. As the door slid shut behind her, he felt a sense of emptiness. He was alone again, surrounded by strange machines and unfamiliar faces. But now, there was something else lingering in his mind, something that hadn't been there before. He wanted to understand Lyra better. He wanted to know what lay beneath her calm exterior, what thoughts and feelings she hid behind those violet eyes. But more than that, he wanted to find a way to bridge the gap between their cultures. He didn't want to make any more mistakes. Elias closed his eyes, trying to focus on the present. He needed to heal. He needed to recover. But somewhere deep inside, he knew that his journey with Lyra was just beginning. The days passed in a blur. Captain Elias tried to adjust to his new reality aboard the Verkalian ship Illumina. At first he had been overwhelmed by the unfamiliar technology, the strange language, and the customs of the Verkalians. But as time went on, things started to settle into a routine. His injuries healed faster than he had expected, thanks to the advanced medical care Lyra and her team had provided. Despite his progress, Elias couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. It wasn't the pain or the confusion that bothered him anymore. It was the distance between him and Lyra. Their interactions had become more reserved. There was no tension, no open hostility. But there was an invisible wall, a silence that lingered whenever they spoke. Elias wasn't sure if he had misunderstood her reaction to his compliment, or if she was just uncomfortable being around him. He wanted to apologize again, but every time he tried to speak, the words stuck in his throat. He wasn't sure how to navigate this alien relationship. He couldn't shake the feeling that his presence was making things difficult for her. Yet despite all of this, Elias found himself thinking about her more than he cared to admit. There was something about Lyra that drew him in. She was so composed, so competent, and yet, in the quiet moments when she wasn't busy with her duties, Elias caught glimpses of something softer, something more vulnerable beneath her calm exterior. He wanted to understand it, to know her better, but the fear of making things worse held him back. One day, as he rested in his room, the door slid open, and Lyra stepped in. She was carrying a tablet, her movements as smooth and controlled as ever. Her violet eyes flickered to him briefly before she began scanning the information on the tablet in her hands. She seemed lost in thought, her focus entirely on the data in front of her. Elias watched her silently for a moment, wondering if today would be the day things finally felt different between them. "Lyra," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I wanted to talk." She glanced up, meeting his gaze with a look of quiet curiosity. "About what, Captain Elias?" Elias shifted uncomfortably on the bed, but he didn't look away. This was important. It had been bothering him for days now, and he couldn't keep it inside any longer. I want to understand," he said. "I know I've probably made things awkward, and I didn't mean to. But I can't shake the feeling that there's something between us that isn't being said. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I just want to be sure that we can get past whatever happened." She just stared at him, as if trying to figure out his intentions. The silence between them stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Elias began to doubt his decision to speak up. Maybe he should have left things alone. Maybe she didn't want to talk about it. But then Lyra set the tablet down and walked closer to him. Her steps were slow, measured. She paused beside his bed, her eyes studying him with an intensity that made his heart race. There was something in the way she looked at him now that felt different, less guarded, less distant. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to make you feel as though I was avoiding you. It's not that. It's just complicated.
Complicated? Elias repeated, a sense of confusion creeping into his voice.
How? Byra took a deep breath, glancing away for a moment. She seemed to struggle with her words, as though trying to find the right way to explain herself. Elias could tell this wasn't easy for her. Our cultures are very different, Elias, she said, her voice steady but tinged with a sadness that made his chest tighten. What you said to me, it wasn't just a compliment. It was a declaration, a kind of promise, a promise that we were not yet ready for.
Elias furrowed his brow. I didn't mean anything by it.
I just thought you were beautiful. I had no idea it was such a big deal. Lyra nodded slowly, her gaze softening as she met his eyes. In our culture, beauty is not something to be taken lightly. When someone speaks of it, it is not just about the physical appearance. It's about acknowledging something deeper, the essence of the person. And it's often accompanied by intent. Elias blinked, trying to make sense of her words. He hadn't thought about it that way. He had only meant to say something nice, to show his appreciation for her. But now he saw that he had accidentally touched on something far more profound than he had realized. I didn't know, Elias admitted, his voice quiet. I didn't know any of this. Lyra gave him a small smile, the first one he had seen in days. It was brief but genuine, and it made Elias feel like maybe, just maybe, there was hope for them yet. I understand that, she said softly. You are not from our world. You don't know the customs, the traditions. But I want you to know that it was not your words that upset me. It was the fact that you unintentionally made a promise that neither of us was ready for. Elias frowned, trying to grasp the full weight of what she was saying. So, what does that mean for us? Myra paused, her gaze shifting toward the window as she thought about her answer. She seemed conflicted, torn between the duty she had as a nurse and the growing connection she felt to him. It means that we must proceed with caution, she said, her voice soft but firm. It means that we must learn from each other. We are from different worlds, and that cannot be ignored. But it also means that I want to understand you, Elias. I want to understand who you are, where you come from. I want to find common ground. Elias felt a spark of hope ignite within him. She wasn't pushing him away. She wasn't rejecting him. She was willing to give him a chance to prove himself, to learn and grow in this strange new world. I'd like that, he said, his voice steady. I want to understand you too. I don't want to make any more mistakes. But I'm also not going to pretend that I don't feel something for you. I think you're incredible. Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time Elias saw something in her expression that made his heart race. It wasn't just appreciation or gratitude. It was something deeper, something that he couldn't quite name but felt in his chest. Then let's take it one step at a time, she said, her voice warm. We don't need to rush anything. We have time to learn, to grow, to understand. That is enough for now. Elias nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. It wasn't the resolution he had hoped for, but it was a start towards something more than just a fleeting connection, a start towards something real. And in that moment, surrounded by the hum of the alien ship and the vast unknown of space, Elias felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just a survivor stranded on a foreign vessel. He was someone on a journey, one that he would take alongside Lyra, learning, growing, and discovering what lay ahead. Captain Elias spent the next few days reflecting on his conversation with Lyra. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how little he understood about her culture, and how much he had to learn. He had assumed that compliments were universal, a simple way to express appreciation. But Lyra had made him see that his words had far deeper meaning. It wasn't just about physical appearance. It was about intent, about respect and acknowledgement in a way that transcended what he knew. Even though things between them felt a little less awkward after their conversation, Elias could still sense the distance between them. Lyra had explained her culture and why his words had affected her, but that didn't make everything feel right. There was still an underlying tension, something unspoken between them, something that lingered in the air whenever they crossed paths. But Elias wasn't one to give up easily. He had been through difficult situations before, and he wasn't about to let a misunderstanding with an alien nurse stop him from finding a way to connect with her. He could tell that Lyra wasn't just any nurse. There was something special about her, something that made him want to know her better. And he couldn't help but feel that, despite their cultural differences, they could find common ground. The days passed slowly, and Elias began to spend more time in the ship's medbay. His injuries were healing faster than he had expected, but he still had moments when he felt weak or disoriented. Lyra had told him to rest, but he often found himself staring out the windows of the ship, looking at the vast emptiness of space. He had never been this far from Earth before, and the isolation felt overwhelming at times. One afternoon, as Elias sat quietly in the medbay, he heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching. He turned to find Lyra entering the room, carrying a small tray with what appeared to be food. "Captain Elias," she said, her voice calm but warm. "I thought you might be hungry." Elias looked at her for a moment, then glanced at the tray in her hands. "I'm not sure what that is," he said, raising an eyebrow. Lyra smiled, her violet eyes sparkling with amusement. "It's a Verkalian dish. I thought you might want to try something different. It's nourishing, and it will help you regain your strength." Elias hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "All right, I'll give it a try," Alchemist pointed as a cautious bite. The table beside him, and Elias took a cautious bite. The flavor was unfamiliar but pleasant, spicy yet comforting. As he ate, Lyra watched him closely, her eyes never leaving his face. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was odd. She had a way of observing him that made him feel both seen and scrutinized at the same time. "Do you like it?" she asked after a moment. "It's different," Elias said with a smile, "but it's good. I didn't think I'd ever eat something like this, but I guess I'm starting to get used to it." Lyra nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth.
Good. I'm glad.
There was a brief pause before Lyra spoke again, her tone more serious now. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her gaze steady and searching. "Physically, I mean. Your injuries are healing well, but I know you must still be processing everything that's happened." Elias set the tray aside and leaned back in his chair. "I'm okay," he said, though the words felt hollow.
"The injuries are nothing, but..." "Yeah, you're right. I'm still trying to make sense of everything."
Lyra's expression softened. She stepped closer to him, her presence filling the room with a quiet intensity. Elias could feel the weight of her gaze, but he didn't shy away. He wanted to be open with her, to share what was on his mind.
"I don't know what to think anymore," he admitted. "I've been to other planets, met other species, but this is different."
"I'm stuck here, light years from home. I don't know how I got here, and I don't know what's going to happen next. And on top of that, well, I've made a fool of myself with you." Lyra raised an eyebrow, as if surprised by his words. "You haven't made a fool of yourself," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You made a mistake, but mistakes are part of learning. I can't expect you to understand everything all at once." Elias nodded, his chest tightening slightly at her words. I didn't mean to make things complicated. I thought we were just talking, you know? I didn't realize how much my words would matter."
"I know," Lyra said, her voice gentle. "It's not your fault."
"You're learning, and so am I. We're both trying to navigate something new." The way she spoke made Elias feel less alone. He had been so focused on his own confusion that he hadn't considered how difficult this might be for her, too. She was from a completely different world, with different customs and expectations, and yet she was still willing to try to make it work between them. For the first time in days, Elias allowed himself to relax. He let the tension slip from his shoulders and gave her a small, sincere smile. "I'm glad we can talk like this," he said quietly. "It feels easier." Lyra smiled back, her expression softening. "It does," she agreed. "We just need to be patient with each other." Elias leaned forward slightly, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable before," he said. "I never wanted to cause you any trouble." Lyra shook her head, her smile never fading. "You didn't, and I'm sorry if I made you feel like you did." The silence that followed was peaceful, comfortable. For the first time since their initial conversation, Elias felt like he was truly connecting with her. There was no barrier between them anymore, no unspoken tension. They were two people trying to understand each other in a strange and unfamiliar world. Over the next few days, Elias and Lyra spent more time together. They would share meals, discuss their respective cultures, and learn about each other's worlds. Elias began to see a side of Lyra he hadn't noticed before: the quiet kindness, the warmth in her eyes when she spoke of her people, and the way she listened intently when he shared stories of Earth. Their bond deepened in small ways, through shared laughter, quiet moments of understanding, and the growing sense that they were no longer just two strangers trapped in a foreign world. They were allies, partners in a journey neither of them could have predicted. Elias wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like there was hope. He still didn't know how he would get home, or if he ever would, but in the midst of the uncertainty, he realized that there was one thing he could hold on to: the connection he had with Lyra. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that, for now, was enough.